What we're going to be working on here is we're going to make some final tweaks to our character, our snail, and we're going to introduce our logo and just kind of finalize the story that we've been working on throughout these series of videos. Let's go ahead and make a few more adjustments to the snail's facial expressions. We also want the snail to remain on screen for the duration of the timeline. Because we've already added the time remapping effect to the snail layer, we have the ability to grab the end of the snail and just extend its visibility out to the end of our timeline. This will allow us to keep the snail on screen. The reason we're currently not seeing the snail is because of this keyframe right here. So if we come to this keyframe, it's set to 4 seconds, which remember in After Effects, we're actually seeing the frame after the playback head. So when our composition ends at 4 seconds, we need to actually just adjust this back so that we can see the correct expression. And what we'll actually do here is we'll come in a bit and we want the snail to kind of look surprised. And then when the lightning strikes is where we want to have the irritated eyes show up. So right as the lightning starts to strike, we're going to change to the irritated eyes. So currently we have a keyframe on the snail layer right here that we did for time remapping. And if we come back in time a little bit, this particular keyframe is where we're showing the hooded eyes. So I'm just going to extend this out a little bit. And I think we want this to occur right after about 7 seconds. So that looks good. So now we have a hold where he's going to look a little worried, and then he's going to have his irritated eyes. After the big thunderclap, we're going to extend out to the unhappy face. And at this point, we are just going to keep him unhappy for a little while, and then eventually this last keyframe is going to change back to the smiling snail. So that's happening at the beginning. And we'll just move this keyframe out a little bit in time, so he'll just be grumpy for a little bit. And we'll probably have to make an adjustment to this once we get the rest of our animation in there. Once our thunder hits and the snail becomes unhappy for about a second or so, we're going to introduce the rest of our text. So let's have that come in around 9 seconds. I don't see the text layer currently, and that's because it's shied. Let's just tidy up our timeline by shying some of the other layers that we're not going to be working on. I'm going to click my master shy switch to turn everything on. We'll shy all of our clouds. We'll shy our lightning, our puddles, and then we're going to unshy our text, the umbrella. We'll leave the tagline shied for now, and we will shy our adjustment layer and the thunder, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit my master shy switch, and obviously this just consolidates my timeline down so that I can concentrate on the layers that I'll be working with. We're going to turn our logo and our umbrella text back on, and we want this information to slide on kind of fast onto the stage. This is the ending position. We're going to go ahead and make sure that our anchor point is in the correct position. So for the umbrella, I'm going to come get my pan behind tool, and we're going to move the anchor point so that it's right at the base of the umbrella. For the logo text, I'm going to move the anchor point in, and we're going to lock this to the lower portion of our last L. That'll make it a little bit easier for us to animate. The other thing that's going to happen is I'm going to be animating the logo text. I want the umbrella to move with it. So we're going to go ahead and parent the umbrella to the logo text. And now we have a relationship between those two items. And since this is our final instance of the logo and the umbrella, this is where we want it to end up, I'm going to open up the logo text position property. We'll set a keyframe. And we actually want this to occur a little bit out in time. So I'm going to come move out to about 10:15. I'll set another keyframe. And now we can move back to the initial keyframe. And we're going to have this come in from being off of the stage. So let's switch to our selection tool, we can select this and you can see the umbrella is going to travel with it. And ultimately it's going to come from way over here. But I'm going to leave it right here for just a minute because I want it to be pretty snappy. I want it to come on the stage pretty quickly. In order to do that, we'll select these keyframes. We'll add our easy ease by clicking our keyboard shortcut of F9. I'm going to open up my speed graph. And if you don't see a graph that looks like this, you want to make sure that you're in the edit speed graph area. And we're going to select these points and just drag the handles in. We've done this before, so that we have a real significant peak with our graph. And this is going to ensure that when the text moves, it comes in and moves real quick, like it starts slow and then it gets into the ending location pretty quickly. In addition to having it move pretty quickly, we're also going to add a little bit of a slant sort of effect. If we come up here to our effects and presets and we search for slant, we have a CC slant effect. I'm going to drag this to the logo text and we're going to want to increase the slant amount. Let's actually turn on keyframing for the slant property. I'll move my playback head out to the location where the text is going to end up, and we're going to add another keyframe. That's not something you can do in the effect panel, but if we go into our effects inside of the timeline, we can go ahead and click this little diamond to add a keyframe at that particular position. I'll use my J key to move back to the first one, and then we're going to increase the slant. So we want this to look like it's really speeding into place. You will notice that the effect properties are not going to apply to our umbrella. If you did want to do that, the solution would be to pre-comp those layers, and then when you apply the effect, it would affect all of the underlying layers. What's going to happen is the text is going to speed in, and as soon as it ends up at its resting spot, then the umbrella is going to quickly snap open. So the umbrella isn't really going to be seen until we get to the ending point. Right before the text gets to the ending point, we're going to have a little bit of a correction. We're going to just come a couple frames before, and we're going to have this slant in the negative direction, and maybe not quite as much as it was before. I think we might have used a value of about 40, so this one can be like half of that, around 20 or something like that. And then what we want to do is we're going to, let's just scoot this out a couple frames. We're going to make a keyframe right in between these, and we'll have this go in the opposite direction a little bit. So this will kind of create that little, like, it's skidding into place, if you will. And we're going to need to add a little bit of easing on that. So I'll use my keyboard shortcut once again. If we watch this, the logo is going to slide into place, and then it's just going to kind of like bounce into its final location. That's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and move this element completely off of the stage. So I'm going to select the logo. We'll just drag it off. This is going to have it come in a little bit snappier. You can see how it just kind of rolls into place. And let's go ahead and affect the umbrella at this point. So I'm going to leave this open so I know where my keyframes are. We'll open our umbrella layer, and we're going to go ahead and open the position of scaling for the umbrella. And I'll create a keyframe at the end. This is the final scaling point that I want. And I'm going to move to the beginning. And what we're going to do is we're going to scale the umbrella so it's closed. And let's actually do this when the umbrella is visible so you can see, and then we'll move the keyframe. I'm going to uncheck the constrained proportions, and we're just going to shrink this in the X value. And basically what we want to do is just set this value so that the umbrella isn't really seen. And in that way, the umbrella is just going to kind of like snap open like so. And we actually want this to happen at the beginning. We want this to be closed. And what we'll do is we'll copy this keyframe. Then I'm going to move the open keyframe out a little bit, and we'll paste in the closed keyframe. And let's just have this happen real quick. I'm going to select these two keyframes. I'll add my easing, F9. We'll open our speed graph, and you can see here's the graph right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the graph just so that I can see the handles. Once again, we're just going to drag these towards the center so that we have a real snappy open of our umbrella. So let's just take a look and see what that gives us if we play this animation now. And it comes in, and then you can see that the umbrella opens real quickly. And that is the effect that we want right there. That's looking pretty good. The next thing that's going to happen is when the logo comes sliding into place, we want it to kind of like bump the snail over a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and use my page up on my keypad to advance the timeline one frame at a time. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to find right before the logo reaches the snail, and we'll go ahead and set a keyframe there for position. So I'm going to open my snail mouth eye layer. We'll click P to open position, and let's do Shift P to leave our time remapping open. We'll turn on keyframing, and then we're going to move over to the end where the logo resides to the ending spot. And our snail is, I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and move it right to the right. This is where we want the snail to end up. Because we want this to kind of follow the same sort of speed as the logo, I'm going to select these two layers. We'll add our easing once again. We'll open our graph editor, and we'll just grab these handles in so that we have a more snappy sort of animation. And let's go back to our main timeline here. So here's our snail. You can see he moves pretty quickly, but we're going to have to make a little bit of adjustments right here. We want him moving a little bit faster. What I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to make a couple more keyframes for position. It seems like right about there he starts to get in place, but here we really need him to scoot over to the right a little bit more. So I'm just going to scooch over to the right because we want it to almost like the logo's going to slam him over here. So we'll have it go a little bit farther where it pushes and then he kind of comes back into place. And then we want our snail to end up smiling once that happens. That movement looks pretty good. The umbrella is going to open, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to have the umbrella rotate over and come over our snail to protect the snail from the rain, and that's going to make our snail smile. So at this point, once the umbrella is open, let's just move out a few frames, and we don't quite want the snail to smile yet, but I'll move out a few frames right here. And this is where the umbrella is going to quickly just do a little cartwheel over. So we'll come to our umbrella layer. We're going to open the property of rotation. I'm hitting Shift Option R to open rotation and leave my scaling property there, and also turn on keyframing. We'll come to around 1110, and we're going to need to move and rotate. So actually on the umbrella layer, before we set this keyframe, let's go ahead and open our position property. So Option Shift P to open position, and then we'll move out a little bit in time. Just get rid of this for right now. This is going to happen pretty quickly. We want the rotation to be one full rotation. So we're going to plug in 1, and you can see that the umbrella is just going to rotate around. And then we also want to move the umbrella. We're just going to move it so that it's over our little snail, and we'll put it right here. And if we go ahead and watch our animation, it is doing what we want it to do, but you can see because of the anchor point, it's rotating based on that point. And I want it to kind of like cartwheel up a little bit. What we'll do is we'll select our position properties right here, and I'm just going to grab these handles that are on the stage and drag up. I'm augmenting the path right here. So now you can see it's just going to kind of take a little bit more of a tumble over to our snail, and that's going to make our snail happy. And let's add our easy ease to smooth out the animation, and let's see what this looks like now. Perfect. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's come back over here for a second. And I just realized that our puddles disappeared, so we're going to have to bring our puddles back. We lost them, so we'll have to extend their visibility. And the umbrella is going to be here, and then the snail's going to smile. And then we want our tagline to fade in. Let's go ahead and just collapse these layers. We'll unshy all of the layers, and then we just talked about wanting to work on our tagline, so I'm going to unshy that. And we need to extend our puddles out a little bit. I'll go ahead and turn those on. We'll reshy everything else. Just so I know where my keyframes are, I'm going to select my snail mouth and I'm going to click U so that I know where my keyframes are occurring. And you can see here's our puddles. Our puddles lose their extension, so I'm just going to stretch them out. And it looks like once the umbrella is here, we're just going to have this puddle fade away. So the umbrella is going to come into the proper location, and we're going to keyframe this puddle to just scale away. So I'm going to open the property of scaling for this puddle, and we'll set a keyframe right around here. And then I'm just going to move the playback head out, and we're just going to scale this down a little bit. We'll shrink it all the way down because it kind of is underneath our umbrella. So I'll just actually set that to 0. It'll be a fast shrinkage. All right, so that's going to look pretty good. And then the other puddle can just remain on screen because it's over here. It's still going to be hit by the rain. And I think my umbrella just needs to be pushed down a little bit. I'm going to open position. Let's go to our keyframe right here. And we just need to move this down. So I'm going to come to my Y position and just move it down just a smidge to tuck it behind the snail's shell. All right, that looks pretty good. And then the final thing is our tagline. Once the snail is smiling, we're going to have our tagline fade in, and we're just going to do a simple opacity on the tagline. I'll come to the tagline. I'm going to click Option Shift T to open up the property of opacity and set a keyframe. And let's turn on the visibility so we can see this. We're going to come to the end of our composition and we'll create another keyframe here, and then we'll back up to the keyframe we just specified and we'll set this to 0. And let's add easing to this just to smooth it out. And I think that's going to be pretty good. Let's rewind this and watch our entire clip and see if there's anything else we need to adjust. Perfect. All right, and this is looping because we're in After Effects, but if I export this out, it's not going to loop. If you want to be able to preview this without looping the file, you'll go to the preview pane, and what we want to do is we want to make sure our timeline is active. And in the preview pane, this icon right here controls looping. So this is on. If we click it one more time, the icon changes to this. And now, if we hit our space bar and we play, the animation will only play through the one time. So it's simply going to just play the one time through, and you can see it's going to stop at the end, which is awesome. The final thing that I'm going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to unshy all of our layers, and we need to add one more sound effect. It is worth mentioning that because I shied my sound layers, when I play through my timeline, you may have noticed that we didn't hear any of our sound effects. If the layers are shied, you won't hear them. Just know that that is something that's going to happen. I'm going to select all my layers and just tap U to collapse them. We'll click our master shy switch to turn everything on. And now if we were to play the animation where there's some sound, you'll hear that the sound are going to return. And the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of a musical sound I have. So I'm going to go to my project window. I'll go into my sound folder. Then I have this little ukulele sound. And let's collapse our thunder, and we'll grab this ukulele and drag it to the bottom. And I'm just going to tap LL so that we can see the waveform. I want this to play just kind of as background noise, but I want it to be a little bit quieter. So if we open up any of our sound effects, you have audio levels. And I think we looked at this before, but I'm just going to lower this down a little bit. So let's take a quick peek. Okay, and then I'm just going to keyframe the music to essentially go away once problems start to occur. So once the rain happens, we're going to fade this out. We can keyframe our audio levels. I'll turn on keyframing, and then I'm just going to make another keyframe very soon thereafter. Let's move this one out just a little bit, maybe right there. And we'll go ahead and reduce the levels way down. Let's go ahead and play one more time and see our final version. Let's create one more second of time in our overall composition. I would like to hold this ending state of my animation for one additional second. We can go to composition, composition settings, and change our overall duration. I'll change this to 13 seconds, giving me one more second. And if I zoom out in the timeline, you can see that now we have a blank area. And of course, if we extend the playback head to this area, none of our layers except our two sound layers are going to exist within this spot. We have the option of being able to grab the ending portion of any layer and click, hold, and dragging it out. But if we do that, we're going to have to do it for every single layer. And depending on the complexity of your project, that could take you a little while. We already know a keyboard shortcut that will allow us to do this. I'm going to click my end key to get my playback head right at the end. And then I'm just going to hold down Option, and we're going to use our right bracket key. This will extend any selected layer. So as you can see, it only affected my solid because that was the only selected layer. So let's just go ahead and undo that. We're going to select all of the layers. I do want to be careful to not select my lightning layer because we don't want to extend that one. And we also don't want to extend our snail whistle. I'm holding down my Command or Control key to deselect those two layers, but the rest of the layers are all things that we are going to want to extend. So with my playback head at the very end, Option, right bracket key, and you can see that almost all of the layers get extended. There are a couple of exceptions, and those are our cloud layers. The reason that the cloud layers are not extending is because if we go and grab these layers and try to extend them, I'm not able to. And that's because these have been pre-comped. So there is a limitation that is tied to the pre-comp of these layers. In order to get around this, we can select these three layers, and we'll just go ahead and go to Time, Enable Time Remapping. And as you may have recalled, once you add time remapping, you can extend the duration of a particular layer out, and it doesn't matter if it's a pre-comp or something else. So now everything has been extended, and if we just play the last few seconds of our animation, there you go. So now we get a little extension at the end of the animation that just extends this last portion and holds it. And of course, the rain and our puddle is still going to animate because those elements are being looped, or in the case of the rain, that's just how that effect works. Hopefully you enjoyed learning how to create a more complex project over the last series of videos that I've shared with you, and you've picked up a lot of different techniques for ways that you can use After Effects to create something that is a little bit more polished and a little bit more involved.